Before we begin, I want to ask this. Have you ever felt like you were working somewhere you shouldn't really be? You know those moments when you feel like even the walls are hiding things they shouldn't. If you've ever felt that way, leave a comment below. Because I need to know I'm not the only one experiencing this strange unease. Also, click the subscribe button. My name is Theodore Bridger, and for 2 years I was the only park ranger assigned to a valley that officially doesn't exist. I didn't take the job because I was brave. I took it because I was empty. I had left the Forest Service 6 months earlier after a string of panic attacks that hit me out of nowhere, during patrols, during routine calls, even standing still. No scandal, no incident report, just the slow realization that my body no longer trusted me. After that, everything unraveled quietly. My marriage had already ended 2 years before. My daughter stopped answering my calls not long after. I bounced between short-term jobs, sleeping badly, counting dollars, pretending I was fine. I was 34 years old and felt like I'd already missed whatever version of life I was supposed to have. That's when I saw the listing. It didn't stand out at first, just another federal posting buried deep in a job board. But something about it made me stop scrolling. Forest Ranger. Remote assignment, minimal public contact. High compensation security clearance required. Must adapt to solitude and strict procedural compliance. The salary was almost double what I'd made before. I applied on a Thursday. My phone rang the next morning. The woman on the line introduced herself as Nan Caller, manager for something called Secret Land Management. Her voice was flat in a way that suggested years of saying only what was necessary. Mr. Point, Bridger, she said, your psychological evaluations indicate you manage stress by compartmentalizing rather than confronting it. That trait is valuable for this assignment. I should have asked what she meant. I didn't. Instead, I asked where the job was. Coro Valley, she said. Northeastern Nevada. Federally restricted. The valley had been closed since 1986. Before that, it was used for military testing, training exercises, and long-term storage. My role would be simple. Monitor security systems, log motion sensor activity, report anomalies according to protocol. What kind of anomalies? I asked. There was a pause. Long enough to make me pull the phone away and check the signal. Most are wildlife, she said finally. Weather, environmental factors. Rarely other things. The interview process took 3 weeks. Background checks that reached back into childhood. Medical evaluations. Psychological screenings. When it ended, I was summoned to a field office in Elko, a concrete building that felt like it had been forgotten sometime around the Nixon administration. Neen met me there in person. She was in her late 50s, steel gray hair pulled tight, eyes that weighed you like a calculation. She slid a thick file across the table. Contracts, liability waivers, confidentiality agreements. Federal prosecution. Permanent removal. Severe legal consequences. All you need to do is sign, she said. As I finished the last page, she looked up. You'll live on site, she added casually. Full time. They would provide lodging, food, satellite internet, backup power. Monthly supply deliveries, daily radio check-ins. Then her tone changed. But once you accept, she said, leaning closer, you are required to remain for a minimum of 2 years. Leaving early or violating protocol will result in legal consequences. I didn't hesitate. They gave me 3 days to pack my life into the back of a government truck. The road into Coro Valley felt wrong almost immediately. Past Elko, the asphalt narrowed and decayed. Cell service died. The land flattened into sagebrush and pale hills that made distance hard to judge. After 12 miles on a gravel road, I reached a checkpoint. A reinforced hut sat in the middle of the road. The barrier lifted before I fully stopped. A man stepped out. He looked close to 60. Thin. Tired. His ranger uniform had once been crisp. His name tag read, Osgood, you're Bridger, he said. Not a question. My shift's over. Yours is beginning. He got into his truck and drove without waiting for a response. I followed. We passed between two ridges and then the valley opened up. Coro Valley wasn't just empty. It felt excavated. 8 miles wide, bowl-shaped, surrounded by steep hills like walls. The ground was pale and lifeless, dotted with concrete foundations, rusted structures, half-buried shelters. 3 old watchtowers rose in the distance. And then I saw the fence. A 12-foot chain-link perimeter topped with razor wire. New. Immaculate. Posts every 100 meters, each crowned with equipment I couldn't identify. The fence looked alive. That's what scared me. The station sat on the northern edge of the valley. Concrete block building, narrow windows, radio tower, generator shed. Built to withstand more than weather. Inside was sparse desk, bed, kitchen, bathroom. Then Osgood opened the equipment room. 16 monitors covered the wall. Fixed cameras, tower feeds, thermal imaging. A control panel beneath them, military-grade radio, switches, dials. 243 motion sensors, he said. Perimeter, interior grid, towers. He tapped a thick ledger. You log everything. Date, time, sensor number, probable cause. And if I don't know, I asked. Write unknown. I asked. Write unknown. Call it in, channel 7 only. He handed me a laminated protocol sheet. Don't leave the station after dark. Don't access sealed structures. Don't investigate the Eastern Quadrant without authorization. What's in the Eastern Quadrant? I asked. Osgood didn't answer immediately. The sensors there go off every night, he said finally. You log them, you report them, and you forget about them. How long have you been here? 14 months. He paused at the door. They started small, he added. Now it's dozens, sometimes hundreds. What do you think it is? He looked at me then, really looked at me, with the eyes of someone who no longer expected relief. Whatever it is, he said, it doesn't move like an animal. Then he left, and I was alone. That night, the valley went silent in a way that felt intentional. At 20:47 hours, the first sensor triggered. Eastern Quadrant. Unknown. I logged it, then another, all moving north. Along the fence, methodical, purposeful, and as I sat in the glow of the monitors, watching the map light up, I realized something cold and undeniable. Whatever was out there knew the valley better than I ever would. And it had noticed me. Have you ever taken a job you knew you shouldn't have taken? Not because it was dangerous, not because it was illegal, but because something about it felt wrong. Like the place itself didn't want witnesses. If you've ever felt that kind of unease, the kind that settles into your chest before your brain can explain it, then you'll understand why I stayed longer than I should have. My name is Ethan Cole, and for 2 years I was the only ranger assigned to a valley that officially doesn't exist. I didn't take the job because I was brave. I took it because I was empty. I'd left the Forest Service 6 months earlier after panic attacks started hitting me out of nowhere. During patrols, routine calls, even when nothing was happening. No incident, no scandal, just the slow realization that my body no longer trusted me. After that, everything fell apart quietly. My marriage had already ended 2 years earlier. My daughter stopped answering my calls soon after. I drifted between temporary jobs, sleeping badly, counting money, pretending I was fine. I was 34 years old and felt like I'd already missed whatever version of life I was supposed to have. That's when I saw the listing. It didn't look special at first, just another federal job buried deep in a database. But something about it made me stop scrolling. Forest Ranger, remote assignment, minimal public contact, high compensation security clearance required, must adapt to solitude and strict procedural compliance. The salary was almost double what I used to make. I applied on a Thursday. My phone rang the next morning. The woman on the line introduced herself as Marla Vance, manager for something called Restricted Land Operations. Her voice was flat in a way that suggested years of saying only what was necessary. "Mr. Belt, Cole," she said, "your psychological evaluations indicate you manage stress by compartmentalizing rather than confronting it. That trait is useful for this assignment." I should have asked what she meant. I didn't. Instead, I asked where the job was. "Raven Rock Valley," she said. "Northeastern Nevada. Federally restricted." The valley had been closed since 1986. Before that, it had been used for military testing, training exercises, and long-term storage. My job would be simple: monitor security systems, log motion sensor activity, and report anomalies according to protocol. "What kind of anomalies?" I asked. There was a pause, long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Most are wildlife," she said finally. "Weather, environmental factors, rarely other things." The interview process lasted 3 weeks. Background checks that reached back into childhood, medical screenings, psychological evaluations. When it ended, I was summoned to a field office in Elko, a concrete building that looked like it had been forgotten decades ago. Marla met me there in person. She was in her late 50s, steel gray hair pulled tight, eyes that studied you like a calculation. She slid a thick file across the table. Contracts, waivers, confidentiality agreements. Federal prosecution. Permanent removal. Severe legal consequences. "All you need to do is sign," she said. As I finished the last page, she looked up. "You'll live on site," she added. "Full time. They would provide housing, food, satellite internet, backup power, monthly supply runs, daily radio check-ins." Then her tone shifted. "But once you accept," she said, leaning forward, "you are required to remain for a minimum of 2 years. Leaving early or violating protocol will result in legal consequences." I didn't hesitate. They gave me 3 days to pack my life into the back of a government truck. The road into Raven Rock Valley felt wrong almost immediately. Past Elko, the asphalt narrowed and cracked. Cell service disappeared. The land flattened into sagebrush and pale hills that made distance hard to judge. After 12 miles on a gravel road, I reached a checkpoint. A reinforced hut sat in the middle of the road. The barrier lifted before I fully stopped. A man stepped out. He looked close to 60. Thin, exhausted. His ranger uniform had once been crisp. His name tag read Harlan Briggs. "You're Cole," he said. "Not a question. My shift's done. Yours is starting." He got into his truck and drove off without waiting. I followed. We passed between 2 ridges, and then the valley opened up. Raven Rock Valley wasn't just empty. It felt excavated. 8 miles wide, bowl-shaped, surrounded by steep hills like walls. The ground was pale and lifeless, scattered with concrete foundations, rusted structures, half-buried shelters. 3 old watchtowers stood in the distance. And then I saw the fence. A 12-foot chain-link perimeter topped with razor wire. New. Perfect. Posts every 100 meters, each topped with equipment I couldn't identify. The fence looked alive. That scared me more than anything else. The station sat on the northern edge of the valley. A concrete block building with narrow windows, a generator shed, and a tall radio tower. It looked like it had been built to survive something worse than weather. Inside was sparse: a desk, a bed, a small kitchen, a bathroom. Then Briggs opened the equipment room. 16 monitors covered the wall. Fixed cameras, tower feeds, thermal imaging, a control panel beneath them, military-grade radio, switches, dials. 243 motion sensors, he said. Perimeter, interior grid, towers. He tapped a thick ledger. You log everything. Date, time, sensor number, probable cause. And if I don't know? I asked. Write unknown. I asked. Write unknown. Call it in. Channel 7 only. He handed me a laminated protocol sheet. Don't leave the station after dark. Don't access sealed structures. Don't investigate the Eastern Quadrant without authorization. What's in the Eastern Quadrant? I asked. Briggs didn't answer right away. The sensors there go off every night, he said finally. You log them, you report them, and you forget about them. How long have you been here? 14 months. He paused at the door. They started small, he added. Now it's dozens, sometimes hundreds. What do you think it is? He looked at me then, really looked at me, with the eyes of someone who no longer expected relief. Whatever it is, he said, it doesn't move like an animal. Then he left. And I was alone. That night, the valley went silent in a way that felt intentional. At 20:37 hours, the first sensor triggered. Eastern Quadrant. Unknown. I logged it. Then another. Then another. Then another. All moving north. Along the fence, slow, methodical, purposeful. And as I sat in the glow of the monitors watching the map light up, one thought settled cold in my chest. Whatever was out there knew this valley better than I ever would, and it had noticed me. The silence didn't ease after Harlan Briggs drove away. It thickened. I'd worked isolated posts before. Fire towers, winter stations, places where quiet was expected. But this was different. Raven Rock Valley wasn't peaceful. It felt like the pause before something decided to move. I stood outside the station for a long moment listening. No wind, no insects, no distant animals. Just empty air pressing in from every direction. Eventually, I went back inside and started unpacking, mostly to give my hands something to do. The station was stocked better than any ranger outpost I'd ever seen. 6 months of canned food. Bottled water stacked chest high. A diesel generator with enough fuel to last through winter. Medical supplies. Spare radio parts. And then the gun locker. Inside was a rifle and far more ammunition than any wildlife post would ever need. That detail stayed with me. I told myself it was standard federal overkill, nothing more. By late afternoon, I'd familiarized myself with the systems. The monitors displayed different sections of the valley, fence lines, watchtowers, wide thermal sweeps painting the ground in blues and reds. Everything looked still, empty. At exactly 1800 hours, the radio crackled. Raven Rock Station, this is command. Radio check. This is Raven Rock, I replied, loud and clear. The voice belonged to Marla Vance. Beginning your first overnight shift, she said. Remember your protocols, especially regarding the Eastern Quadrant. Copy that. A brief pause. The first few weeks are always the hardest, she added. You'll settle in. The transmission ended. I didn't feel reassured. Night arrived fast. One moment, the valley was washed in amberlight. The next, it was swallowed by darkness so complete it felt artificial. I shut off the interior lights and let my eyes adjust, watching the monitors glow softly in the equipment room. The thermal cameras showed nothing but cool blues. At 20,047 hours, a soft beep sounded. I flinched. A red indicator lit up on the map display. Sensor 087 Eastern Quadrant. I checked the corresponding camera feed. Grainy. Low contrast. Nothing visible beyond scrub and shadow. I opened the ledger. 2047, Sensor 087, Eastern Quadrant, unknown. 5 minutes passed, another beep. Sensor 089, then 0892, then 09 Friv. All Eastern Quadrant. All spaced in a way that suggested movement, not random triggers, but progression. Something traveling north, following the fence line. I logged each one carefully, my handwriting tightening with every entry. When the fourth alert chimed, I keyed the radio. Command, this is Raven Rock. Multiple Eastern Quadrant triggers. Movement appears consistent along the perimeter. Requesting guidance. Marla's voice came back immediately. Acknowledged. Log activity. Do not investigate. This is normal evening pattern. Normal. That word sat wrong. Over the next hour, I logged 43 separate triggers. Not scattered. Not chaotic. Purposeful. Whatever was out there wasn't wandering. It was checking the fence. At 2300 hours, the sensors went quiet. The silence afterward felt heavier than before, like something holding its breath. I stayed in the control room until nearly midnight, watching empty screens, waiting for another alert that didn't come. When I finally lay down, sleep wouldn't take. Every small noise made my muscles tense, the building settling, the faint hum of the generator, the distant whisper of wind brushing the hills. Somewhere beneath it all, I thought I heard a low vibration, almost subsonic, too steady to be wind. I told myself it was the generator. I was almost asleep when the alarm sounded again. This one was louder, closer. I was on my feet instantly. Sensor 012, northern perimeter, less than a quarter mile from the station. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the control room, pulling on boots as I moved. The camera feed showed darkness, but the sensor map pulsed red in a way that left no doubt. Something had crossed the line. I grabbed the radio. Command Raven Rock. Northern perimeter sensor triggered. Repeat. Proximity alert. Silence. I waited, counting seconds. Command, do you copy? Static. Then Marla's voice, different now. Tighter. Confirm sensor number. Sensor 012. Approximately 400 yards from station. Acknowledged. Maintain position. Do not exit the building. Instructions pending. The transmission cut off. I stood there, staring at the northern feed, trying not to imagine distance in terms of walking time. Then I saw movement. Just at the edge of the frame, a pale shape sliding through darkness. Low to the ground. Smooth. The night vision cast everything in green, turning the landscape unreal. The shape stopped, and I swear it turned its head, not randomly, not scanning, directly toward the camera, toward me. My pulse roared in my ears. I grabbed the rifle from the locker and moved to the window, pressing my face to the reinforced glass. Outside, the floodlights barely reached beyond the immediate perimeter. Nothing visible. The radio crackled. Raven Rock, maintain position. Do not engage. Trigger likely environmental. Temperature differential along fence line. Environmental. The word felt like a lie someone had practiced. I stayed there for an hour, rifle across my knees, watching the monitors. The shape didn't return. The sensor didn't trigger again. Eventually, exhaustion dulled the edge of fear. By dawn, I almost believed Marla was right. Almost. Morning light stripped the Valley of Mystery, revealing only dead grass and pale soil. I made coffee, logged the night's events in exacting detail, and tried to convince myself this was just an isolated, strange assignment. But as the sun climbed, one thing became impossible to ignore. The eastern quadrant sensors had triggered again. Every night, at nearly the same times, same movement pattern. Animals didn't do that. During the day, I reviewed the map more closely. The eastern quadrant covered nearly a quarter of the valley. Darker soil, clusters of old bunkers, sealed structures marked restricted in thick red lines. I drove the western perimeter that afternoon. Everything looked normal. Aged fence, standard equipment. When I reached the eastern side, the difference was immediate. The fence was heavier gauge. The razor wire doubled, angled inward as well as out. The sensors were different too. Unfamiliar shapes mounted every few feet. And the air smelled wrong. Chemical. Metallic. Like ozone mixed with decay. Near one section of fence, I noticed scratches, long vertical marks gouged into the metal. Repeated at regular intervals. Testing marks. At the base, the soil was compressed into elongated impressions. Not footprints. Something heavier. My radio crackled sharply. Raven Rock, report location. Eastern perimeter. Conducting inspection. A pause. Return to station immediately. Eastern inspections require authorization. I didn't argue. That night, the sensors triggered again, and this time I knew with certainty whatever was out there wasn't reacting to the valley. It was reacting to me. By the end of my first week, I had stopped pretending the Eastern Quadrant was normal. Every night followed the same pattern. The sensors activated between 2040 and 21,000, always starting near the southeastern fence line. The triggers moved north in clean, deliberate intervals. No backtracking, no random bursts, no gaps that suggested confusion. Whatever was out there knew exactly where it was going. I knew this because I started graphing the data. It wasn't part of my assignment, but boredom and unease will push you towards strange habits. I copied sensor numbers and timestamps into a separate notebook, drawing lines between points, tracking movement paths. The result was unsettling. The triggers formed routes, not wandering paths. Routes that repeated night after night with minor variations, like something trekking the same perimeter over and over, adjusting slightly each time. I reported everything as instructed. Eastern Quadrant activity, unknown cause, every time. Command never asked follow-up questions. On the seventh night, the sensors didn't stop at the fence. At 22,011 hours, sensor 114 triggered. Interior grid. That one sat nearly half a mile inside the valley. I stared at the map display, waiting for the alert to disappear. It didn't. I keyed the radio. Command, Raven Rock. Interior sensor 14 triggered. Eastern Quadrant. Marla responded quickly, but her voice lacked its usual neutrality. Acknowledged. Logged the event. Do not investigate. Interior grid triggers aren't normal, I said before I could stop myself. There was a pause. They are in this sector, she replied. Continue logging. That was the first time she'd admitted it. They. Shh. Sip became impossible after that. I started leaving the lights on, the hum of the station the only thing keeping the silence from closing in completely. Even during the day, the valley felt different now. Less empty, more observant, like something was listening even when it wasn't moving. On the ninth day, curiosity finally outweighed caution. The filing cabinets in the back office had been locked since I arrived. Briggs hadn't mentioned them, and protocol said nothing about them, which made them impossible to ignore. The key was in his old desk drawer, buried beneath outdated supply forms. I hesitated for a long time before using it. Then I unlocked the first cabinet. Maintenance logs, vehicle records, inventory sheets, nothing unusual. The second cabinet was different. Older files, thicker folders, many stamped with classifications I didn't have clearance for. I pulled one labeled Personnel Roster, 1982-1986, 21 names, military ranks, technical specialties, assignment dates, and a column labeled Status. 17 read discharged. 4 did not. Missing. Presumed deceased. No explanations. No incident summaries. Just dates. All between 1984 and 1986. All assigned to Eastern Quadrant operations. My throat tightened. I opened another folder marked Incident Reports. The first entry described a sentry failing to respond to a scheduled radio check. His post had been found abandoned. Weapon present. Radio intact. No footprints leading away. No signs of struggle. The perimeter fence showed no breach. Another report detailed a technician who vanished while servicing sensors near a sealed bunker. Her truck was found idling, door open. Equipment scattered as if dropped mid-step. Again, no tracks. No blood. No explanation. Each report ended with the same recommendation: classify as AWOL, pending further investigation. The final document in the folder was a memo dated months later. Sensor activity in the Eastern Quadrant has increased 300% since last incident. Recommend evacuation. Below it, a stamped response. Request denied. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding. This wasn't new. Whatever was out there had been active decades ago. Active enough to make trained military personnel disappear. The radio crackled. Raven Rock, daily check-in. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "This is Raven Rock," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Any unusual activity?" I looked at the open cabinet, the files spread across the desk. "No," I lied. "Standard Eastern Quadrant triggers." Acknowledged. The line went dead. I closed the cabinet and locked it. That night, the sensors changed again. Instead of following the fence, the triggers clustered around one point, a structure marked on the map as Storage Facility 7. An old bunker. Sealed. The triggers weren't moving past it. They were circling it. I switched to the nearest camera feed and zoomed in. The resolution wasn't great, but I saw movement. Low. Pale. More than one. They moved with coordination, taking turns approaching the bunker entrance, retreating, repositioning, like problem-solving. I called it in. Command Raven Rock. Multiple Eastern Quadrant triggers converging on Storage Facility 7. Movement appears coordinated. There was a long pause. Then Marla's voice came back sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Maintain observation. Do not approach. Describe what you see." "They're testing the structure," I said. "Like they're trying to get inside." "Copy," she replied. "Response team is monitoring." That word again. Team. For 20 minutes, I watched them work. At one point, all movement stopped simultaneously. Every shape froze around the bunker, perfectly still. Then they moved again. Faster this time. The bunker door shuddered. I couldn't hear it, but I could see the vibration through the camera. "Command," I said quietly. "The door is deforming." "Understood," Marla replied. "Continue monitoring." I gripped the edge of the desk, feeling helpless in a way I hadn't experienced before. This wasn't wildlife. This wasn't weather. This was intent. At 22:58, the movement stopped. The shapes withdrew from the bunker and vanished back into the darkness, as if recalled by some unseen signal. The sensors went silent. I sat there long after midnight, replaying the footage, pausing frame by frame, trying to make sense of proportions that didn't fit anything I knew. Long limbs. Narrow torsos. Too fluid. Too deliberate. The next morning, I found new scratches on the eastern fence, deeper this time. And near the bunker, fresh impressions in the soil. Heavier. More numerous. The radio crackled mid-morning. Raven Rock. Effective immediately. Eastern Quadrant inspections are suspended. All monitoring will be remote only. "Why?" I asked. A pause. "For your safety." That answer terrified me more than the truth ever could have. That night, I set up my personal recorder to capture the monitor feeds. If Command wasn't going to explain what was happening, I was going to document it myself. Because something in Raven Rock Valley wasn't just active. It was preparing. And whatever it wanted inside that bunker, it was getting closer to it every night. The recorder changed everything. I mounted it directly in front of the monitor wall, angled to capture all 16 screens at once. It wasn't sophisticated, just a consumer-grade device with a large memory card, but it gave me something the system logs didn't. Proof. If Command ever decided I'd imagined things, or if something happened to me, the footage would speak for itself. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep. I sat in the equipment room with the lights low, watching the thermal feeds and the sensor map pulse softly like a living thing. At 20:41 hours, the first trigger appeared. Eastern Quadrant. Right on schedule. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 5 more. But this time, the pattern was different. They weren't moving along the fence. They were moving inward. My breath caught. The triggers formed a widening arc, converging again on Storage Facility 7. I switched feeds rapidly, tracking movement through overlapping camera angles. On the thermal display, heat signatures flickered into existence. Not bright like animals, but muted pale shapes sliding across the terrain. There were more than before. At least 8. maybe 10. They moved in coordinated bursts, stopping together, repositioning together. No wasted motion. No hesitation. I keyed the radio. Command Raven Rock. Multiple contacts in Eastern Quadrant converging on Storage Facility 7. Count is higher than previous nights. Marla responded immediately. Copy. Maintain observation. Do not intervene. I'm recording, I added. There was a brief pause. That is not prohibited, she said carefully. Not prohibited. Not approved. Through the enhanced camera feed, I saw one of them clearly for the first time. It stepped into the floodlight spill near the bunker, and the image sharpened just enough to steal my breath. It was tall, not towering, maybe 6.5 feet, but elongated in a way that made its proportions feel wrong. The limbs were too long for the torso, joints bending with a fluid grace that didn't match human movement. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, reflecting light instead of absorbing it. It paused near the bunker door, and it tilted its head, not like an animal listening, like something assessing. The others gathered behind it, forming a loose semicircle. The lead figure pressed a limb against the steel door. The metal bowed. I watched, frozen, as the reinforced door visibly deformed under pressure that shouldn't have been possible without heavy equipment. Command, I said quietly. The door is failing. Continue recording, Marla replied. Her voice was tight now. Response assets are mobilizing. Assets, not personnel, the door held. Barely. After 2 minutes of sustained pressure, the figure withdrew. The group retreated several yards, regrouped, then dispersed into the darkness as abruptly as they'd arrived. The sensors fell silent. I sat there shaking, replaying the footage, zooming frame by frame. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't interpretation. Whatever these things were, they were real, physical, and capable of exerting tremendous force. And they were focused on that bunker. The response team arrived at dawn. 3 vehicles, no markings. 6 people in tactical gear. Efficient, silent. Their leader was a woman in her 40s with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself only as Captain Rowe. I need to see your recordings, she said. I hesitated, then handed over the device. She watched without comment, face unreadable as the pale figure filled the screen. When it ended, she turned to me. You did not see this, she said flatly. The recording will be classified and removed from your possession. I need to know what they are, I said. Her gaze hardened. No, you don't. She gestured for her team to follow her back outside. Before leaving, she paused. The fence will be reinforced. Additional sensors installed. Your protocols remain unchanged. Then she was gone. By nightfall, the eastern fence looked different. Heavier gauge metal, extra bracing, new equipment mounted at half the previous spacing. They didn't explain. They never did. The activity changed immediately. The entities returned earlier, before full dark, and they weren't testing the fence anymore. They ignored it. All movement focused on Storage Facility 7. The thermal cameras showed at least 5 distinct heat signatures, circling the structure, working in rotation, probing weaknesses with unnerving patience. I called it in. Command, Raven Rock. Multiple contacts actively attempting to breach Facility 7. Marla's reply came fast. Maintain observation. Do not approach. I don't think the door will hold much longer, I said. There was silence. Then, we are aware, that night they almost succeeded. I watched the bunker door bend inward, the hinges twisting under pressure that made my teeth ache, just watching it. At one point, all 5 figures pressed against the same spot. The door shrieked. Then something changed. All movement stopped. Simultaneously, The figures withdrew, fading back into the darkness like mist. I didn't sleep. The next morning, new equipment arrived. High-resolution cameras, improved thermal imaging, a red phone placed on my desk with a single button. "That's your emergency line," one of the technicians said quietly. "If anything breaches containment, you press it immediately." "How fast is response?" I asked. "Under 20 minutes. That wasn't comforting. That meant they expected a breach. That night, the sensors activated across the eastern quadrant all at once, not sequentially. Together. I watched the monitors light up, my stomach sinking as dozens of triggers appeared simultaneously. They were gathering, and they weren't hiding anymore. Through the upgraded cameras, I counted at least 12, maybe more. They formed a loose ring around the bunker. Then they began moving in synchronized patterns, back and forth, in unison, like a ritual. I grabbed the radio. "Command, they're coordinating." "This is different." Marla's voice came back strained. "We see it." The figures converged on the door, all at once. The metal screamed. The bunker shook. I watched the hinges shear. The door held for seconds. Then it failed. It tore inward, collapsing into darkness. For a moment, everything froze. Then the figures began entering the bunker. One by one, calm, purposeful, as if reclaiming something that belonged to them. I hovered over the red phone. "Not yet," Marla said sharply. "We need confirmation." I watched the last figure disappear into the bunker. Then the sensors went dead. Every single one in the eastern quadrant. Offline. "Command," I whispered. "I've lost sensor coverage." There was a pause that stretched too long. Then Marla said the words that confirmed my worst fear. "Ethan, press the button." My finger hovered over the red button. I'd been trained to respond to emergencies, to follow procedures under pressure, but nothing in my career prepared me for a moment like this. The monitors showed nothing but dead feeds where the eastern quadrant used to be. No static, no flicker, just black. "Ethan," Marla said through the radio, her voice barely steady. "Press the button now." I hesitated. "What happens after I do?" I asked. There was a pause, not a technical one, but a human one. "Evacuation protocols," she said carefully. "You'll have 30 minutes to reach the northern checkpoint. After that, the valley will be sealed." Sealed. The word carried weight I didn't fully understand yet. "And the response teams?" I asked. "They know the timeline." That wasn't an answer. I pressed the button. The red phone came alive instantly, emitting a sharp tone before a new voice cut through. Male, clipped, unmistakably military. "This is Contingency Command. Evacuation protocol initiated. You have 30 minutes from mark. Exit via northern route only. Do not deviate. Acknowledge." "Acknowledged," I said, my mouth dry. The line went dead. I checked my watch. 29 minutes, 40 seconds. I grabbed my emergency pack, water, flare gun, medical kit, and slung it over my shoulder. The truck keys sat on the desk beside the logbook, exactly where I'd left them. I moved toward the door. Then every monitor in the room changed. All 16 screens switched to the same feed. The eastern fence line. My breath caught. The camera showed the interior side of the perimeter, illuminated by floodlights. At first it looked empty. Then movement. Figures emerged from the darkness, pale forms resolving into shapes I now recognized too well. They weren't rushing. They weren't panicking. They were organizing. A line stretched across the valley floor, dozens of them spaced evenly apart, all facing north. Facing me. And at the center of that line stood the tallest one. The same figure I'd seen near the bunker nights earlier. Larger. More defined. It was holding something, wrapped. Carefully. The radio crackled. Not Marla. Not any voice I'd heard before. Multiple voices spoke at once, layered together in harmonics that made my skin crawl. Ethan Cole. We know you were there. I stumbled back a step, heart slamming against my ribs. How are you on this frequency? I whispered. We have always understood your methods of communication, the voices replied. We have been listening since you arrived, since others arrived before you. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. What do you want? I asked. To show you, they said, what you have been guarding. The tall figure knelt and gently unwrapped what it carried. The bundle fell away. My knees nearly buckled. It was a body, smaller than the others, different. Its proportions were softer, almost graceful. Even through the screen, even from that distance, there was something unmistakably peaceful about it. An emissary. We came to this world in peace, the voices continued. Explorers, observers. Your kind captured us, studied us, killed those you could not understand. My watch ticked loudly in the silence. 22 minutes remaining. That one, the voices said, was sent to speak. Your military destroyed her vessel in 1953. She was imprisoned, experimented upon. When she no longer served your curiosity, she was stored here. Stored. Like equipment. Like cargo. We searched for her for decades, they continued. For all of us. 7 were taken. 7 were sealed away. The figures along the fence shifted, each holding a similar bundle. They are ours, the voices said. Tonight we reclaim them. You're free to leave, the voices added. Your kind intends to erase this place, to bury the evidence of what they did. You may escape before that happens. What if I stay? I asked. There was a pause. Then you become witness, they replied. Not taken, not harmed. Preserved. When your species is ready to face the truth, you will remain as memory. I looked at the door, at the keys, at the countdown on my watch. 18 minutes. Behind the glass, the valley floor began to change. The air shimmered, as if reality itself was thinning. The fence rippled where the figures touched it, not breaking, not bending, but behaving like water. One by one, they passed through. Not over, not under, through. The barrier sealed behind them as if nothing had happened. All except the tall figure. It stood there a moment longer, meeting the camera's gaze, then carefully placed the emissary's body on the ground like an offering. Then it turned and walked away, dissolving into the hills beyond the valley. I was alone again. The radio crackled. Marla's voice broke through, raw with urgency. Ethan, please. You need to leave. Whatever they told you, whatever you think you understand, it's not worth your life. I keyed the mic. Someone has to remember, I said quietly. Someone has to know we weren't the victims. There was silence on the line. I switched the radio off. I sat down at the desk and opened the logbook to a fresh page. I wrote everything. The disappearances. The bunkers. The bodies. The lies. Not in sanitized reports. In plain language. The truth. My watch showed 10 minutes. The light outside intensified, spreading from the eastern quadrant outward, a pale glow washing over the valley floor. The bunkers collapsed inward, folding into themselves as if being erased. The fence dissolved completely. At 5 minutes, the station vibrated gently like a heartbeat. At 1 minute, the light became blinding. And then, everything stopped. I didn't lose consciousness. That was the first thing I realized. There was no impact, no rush of pain, no darkness swallowing everything whole. One moment the valley was dissolving into light, and the next I was sitting at the desk, my hands resting on the open logbook exactly where I'd left them. The pen was still in my fingers, The station lights hummed softly overhead. For a few seconds I thought nothing had happened. That the evacuation timer had glitched. That command had overreacted. That I was still alone in Raven Rock Valley, waiting for instructions that would never come. Then I looked at the monitors. They weren't dark. They weren't showing static. They were gone. Not powered off, not broken. Gone. The wall where 16 screens had been mounted was now bare concrete, smooth and unmarked, like the equipment had never existed at all. The control panel beneath them was missing too. No switches, no dials, just an uninterrupted stretch of wall. My radio sat on the desk. I picked it up. "Command," I said. Nothing. I switched channels. Tried every frequency I knew. Silence. The red phone was still there. I pressed the button. No tone. No voice. Dead. That's when I noticed the cold. Not discomfort. Precision. Like the temperature had been set deliberately and locked in place. My breath fogged faintly, though I didn't feel chilled. I checked my watch. It was still running. The time read Z0612. The date hadn't changed. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, Raven Rock Valley no longer looked like a valley. The hills were still there, but they felt flatter, less defined. The sky had a washed-out quality, like color had been drained just enough to be noticeable. There was no fence, no towers, no bunkers, no bunkers, no roads. The ground was smooth, uninterrupted, pale stone stretching to the horizon, perfectly empty. Except for one thing. Near where the eastern quadrant had been, something lay on the ground. I opened the station door. It unlocked easily. No alarms, no resistance. The air outside was silent in a way I'd never experienced before. Not absence of sound, but absence of echo. My footsteps didn't carry. They didn't seem to belong to the space. I walked slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, something would shatter. When I reached the object, my knees went weak. It was the emissary. Or what remained of her. Her body lay exactly as the tall figure had placed it, arms folded, features calm, untouched by decay. The material that had wrapped her was gone, but her form was preserved as if time had lost interest. I knelt beside her. Up close, the differences were subtle but unmistakable. Slightly elongated fingers. Facial symmetry that felt intentional rather than biological. Closed eyes that looked peaceful, not empty. This wasn't a monster. This was a diplomat. I reached out, then stopped myself. Some instincts told me this wasn't mine to touch. Behind me, the station door closed softly. I turned. The building was different. Still there. Still solid. But wrong. The windows reflected nothing. The concrete looked too clean, edges too precise, like a model rather than a structure meant to weather time. I went back inside. The logbook was still open on the desk. Everything I'd written remained, but the pages before it, weeks of logs, sensor data, meticulous notes were gone. Not torn out, never written. Only the final entry existed. My handwriting. My words. The truth. I sat down slowly. "How long?" I whispered. There was no response, but the air shifted. Not wind. Presence. "You are not outside of time," the voices said, no longer layered, no longer overwhelming. "You are simply no longer moving through it." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you will not age. You will not decay. You will not leave." My throat tightened. "And the world?" I asked. "It will continue," they said, "without this place, without this memory." I thought of my daughter, her unanswered calls, the way her voice sounded when she was younger. Will anyone know what happened to me? "Yes," they said, "but not yet. Days passed." or something like days. I slept, I woke. I ate food that replenished itself without explanation. The generator never ran out. The lights never failed. The valley outside never changed. Sometimes I walked its length, though distance behaved strangely. What should have taken hours took minutes. The horizon never came closer. At night, if it was night, the sky held unfamiliar stars. Not new. Old. Watching. I kept writing. That became my purpose. I documented everything I remembered. Every lie. Every omission. Every name I'd read in the files. I wrote until my hand cramped, then rested, then wrote again. Sometimes I felt watched, not threatened, observed, as if I were part of an exhibit. Once I asked aloud, "Why me?" The answer came gently. You were willing to see without needing to justify what you saw. I don't know how long it's been. Weeks, years, centuries. Time behaves differently here. But sometimes, rarely, the station vibrates. Not violently. Like a distant knock. And when it does, I feel something new. Anticipation. Because someday, someone will come looking. Someone will breach the seals they believe are permanent. Someone will uncover this place and wonder why it doesn't exist on any map. And when they do, I'll be here, still writing, still waiting, still waiting, still remembering what humanity tried to forget. The first sign that the outside world still existed was the noise. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was wrong. A low vibration rippled through the station floor, subtle enough that I almost dismissed it as another phantom sensation. But it returned again a few minutes later, steadier this time, followed by something I hadn't heard in what felt like forever. Human voices. Distant. Muffled. Real. I stood slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, whatever fragile connection had formed would vanish. The voices grew clearer. Orders. Short sentences. Radio chatter. I went to the window. For the first time since the light, the valley was changing. The smooth stone surface rippled outward from a single point near the northern edge. Like water disturbed by a dropped object, shapes emerged from the distortion. Vehicles, angular and familiar, forcing their way into a place that resisted them. The northern checkpoint was reforming, badly. The air around it warped, edges bending as if reality itself was being coerced into alignment. They'd found a weakness. They always do. I stepped outside. The ground felt solid beneath my boots, but every step sent faint tremors through the valley, like I was walking across something that was only pretending to be land. A convoy rolled through the breach. 4 vehicles, matte black, bristling with equipment. Men and women in sealed suits disembarked, moving with the confidence of people who believed preparation equaled control. I recognized the posture. I used to wear it. One of them noticed me. He froze, then shouted. Weapons came up instantly. "Contact! Contact! Soviet at 12 o'clock!" I raised my hands. "It's okay," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "You're not supposed to be here." That didn't help. They surrounded me in seconds, rifles trained on my chest. A woman stepped forward, visor reflecting the pale light of the valley. "Identify yourself," she demanded. "Ethan Cole," I said. "Ranger, Raven Rock Station." Her head tilted slightly. "That station was decommissioned," she said. "There's no record of any active personnel." I smiled despite myself. That tracks. They restrained me anyway. Protocol always wins in moments like this. They led me toward the station, their boots leaving faint impressions that faded almost immediately. The building loomed ahead, unchanged, untouched by time. One of them muttered, "This place shouldn't exist." He was right. Inside, the team fanned out quickly, scanning walls, ceilings, floors. Their instruments chirped and spiked, screens flashing readings they clearly didn't understand. "This structure isn't aging," someone said. No erosion, no degradation. Another voice, I'm not getting baseline physics. It's like the constants are wrong. They brought me to the desk. The logbook lay open. One of the technicians reached for it. The air shifted, not violently, firmly. His hand stopped inches above the page. What the hell? He muttered, straining as if pushing against invisible resistance. I shook my head. It's not for you, I said quietly. The woman in charge turned to me. You need to explain what this place is, she said. Now. I met her eyes. You won't like the answer. They set up a temporary command post near the breach. More vehicles arrived, more personnel, more equipment forcing its way into a place that rejected every intrusion. I was questioned for hours, days, or what passed for days. They asked about the lights, the entities, the bunker, the evacuation order. I told them everything. Not summaries, not redacted versions. The truth. Some listened, some didn't. Some laughed nervously and wrote notes they would later pretend didn't exist. The logbook changed hands repeatedly, passed from expert to expert, none of whom could remove it from the station. Attempts to photograph the pages resulted in blank images. Audio recordings failed. Only direct observation worked, and only for a few minutes at a time. This is impossible, one scientist said, rubbing his temples. Information doesn't behave like this. It does here, I replied. On the third day, they tried to leave. The breach wouldn't reopen. Panic set in fast. Equipment malfunctioned. Radios lost signal. GPS units spun uselessly. The valley wasn't trapping them. It was ignoring them. That's when the voices returned. Not for me. For them. The sound rolled across the valley, layered and harmonic, shaking people to their knees. Several dropped their weapons, hands clapped over their ears. You were not invited, the voices said. The lead officer shouted orders, but no one moved. This place is sealed for our reason. I felt it then. Not fear, but disappointment. They told you, I said softly. You just didn't listen. The ground near the breach began to dissolve again, reality folding inward. Vehicles sank halfway before being ejected violently back through the opening, tossed like debris. One by one, the recovery team was forced out. All except me. The woman who'd first questioned me tried to reach for my arm as she was dragged backward by the distortion. Come with us, she shouted. We can get you out. I didn't move. I already made my choice, I said. The breach collapsed. Silence returned. The valley reset. The stone smoothed. The sky faded back to its muted stillness. The station door stood open behind me. I went inside and sat at the desk. The logbook waited. A new page had turned on its own. I began writing again. Outside, far beyond the hills, the world continued. They would file reports, bury evidence, classify everything beyond recognition. But some of them had seen, and once you see something like this, it doesn't let you go. The voices spoke one last time, closed now, almost gentle. They will try again, they said. I know, I replied. And you will remain, yes. A pause. Then you are no longer a witness alone, they said. You are a threshold. The air settled. The valley held. And somewhere beyond it, people were already planning their return, convinced that next time they would be better prepared. They were wrong. Some places don't exist to be conquered. Some truths don't want to be uncovered. And some memories refuse to stay buried, no matter how much force you apply. I kept writing. I always will. I didn't know the world was changing at first. Raven Rock had its own rules now. Time stretched, folded, looped back on itself, and days no longer arrived with the same certainty they once had. But eventually, patterns emerged, subtle at first, then undeniable. It began with the sky. One morning, if morning still meant anything, the muted haze above the valley fractured. Thin lines appeared, like stress cracks in glass, faint but persistent. They didn't move, they didn't spread, they waited. When I asked the voices what it meant, they didn't answer. That silence was new. The next sign came through the breach scars. Places where the recovery team had forced their way in hadn't healed correctly. The stone there shimmered differently, reflecting angles that didn't exist elsewhere in the valley. Sometimes, when I stood near one long enough, I heard echoes, not voices. News, fragments, unexplained sensor failures across, aviation incident over restricted airspace. Multiple witnesses report the outside world was brushing up against the edge of this place, and it was noticing. The first human to come through wasn't military. He arrived alone. I saw him long before he reached the station. A lone figure stumbling through the valley like a man walking through a dream he couldn't wake from. No convoy, no equipment, just a backpack and desperation. When he saw the station, he fell to his knees. I helped him inside. His name was Daniel, and he was shaking so badly he could barely speak. He told me he'd been hiking miles away when his GPS failed. The sky had bent, he said. The land had folded in on itself. One wrong step and he'd fallen into the valley. I saw lights, he whispered. Figures on the hills. I thought I was dead. You're not, I said. But you're not supposed to be here either. He laughed weakly. That's what they said too. Who? He looked at me, eyes glassy. The ones watching. The voices didn't intervene. That terrified me. Daniel stayed 3 days, or maybe 3 hours. Time resisted measurement now. He slept constantly, waking only to scribble notes in a journal he carried. Sketches of symbols, patterns in the sky, shapes he claimed appeared in his dreams and followed him when he woke. They're mapping us, he said once, staring at the wall. Not just this place, everything. On the 4th day, or the moment that felt like one, the valley reacted. The ground vibrated gently. The sky fractures brightened. Daniel clutched his head and screamed. I hear them, he cried. They're arguing. I rushed to him but stopped when the air thickened between us. Daniel, the voices said, not unkindly. You cannot stay. I don't want to go back, he sobbed. They won't believe me. They'll lock me up. That is not our concern, the voices replied. This place is not for the unprepared. The light gathered around him, soft but firm, lifting him gently to his feet. I wanted to protest. I didn't. He looked at me one last time. You're not a prisoner, he said. You're a warning. Then he was gone. The valley smoothed again. The cracks in the sky dimmed, but didn't disappear. After that, the leaks accelerated. Satellites malfunctioned in clusters over the region. Deep space telescopes picked up signals that didn't correspond to any known source. People across the world began reporting identical dreams, standing in a pale valley, watching a lone building that felt impossibly important. Forums filled with speculation. Governments denied everything. Quiet task forces formed anyway. I could feel them probing, testing. Every attempt to observe this place directly left scars elsewhere. Sudden sinkholes, power grid failures, brief moments where gravity misbehaved. The voices spoke to me more often now. They are close to understanding, they said, but understanding without context leads to fear. What happens if they force it? I asked. They fracture themselves, came the answer. Just as they did before. I thought of the emissary, of the bunkers, of bodies sealed away because someone panicked instead of listening. One night, the station radio turned on by itself. Static resolved into a familiar voice. "Marla." "Ethan," she said softly. "If you can hear me, please respond." My chest tightened. "I'm here," I said. Her breath hitched. "Oh, thank God. They told us you were gone, that the valley collapsed." "It did," I replied. "Just not the way you think." Silence stretched between us. "They're seeing things now," she said. "Across the world. Cracks in the sky. Signals. People dreaming the same place." I looked out the window. "They pushed too hard," I said. "This was always the outcome. We're trying to contain it," she insisted. "That's what you said last time." Her voice broke. "What do we do?" I closed my eyes. "You stop digging," I said. "You stop sealing. You stop pretending this is an enemy. And if we don't," the valley pulsed faintly around me, "then this place won't stay contained," I said, "and next time it won't be gentle." The radio went silent. It never turned on again. The sky fractures are brighter now, visible even from inside the station. Sometimes I see shapes moving beyond them, not invading, not approaching, observing, the way scientists observe a volatile experiment nearing its breaking point. I keep writing. I document every change, every intrusion, every failed attempt to dominate what was never meant to be owned. Because this isn't about Raven Rock anymore. It's about what happens when a species mistakes control for safety and secrecy for survival. The voices stand with me now, not above, not below, beside. They will come again, they say. I know, I answer. And when they do, I look at the logbook. At least this time, I say, they won't be able to say they weren't warned. The first public acknowledgement happened by accident. It wasn't a press conference or a whistleblower or some dramatic reveal. It was a live stream. A university observatory in Chile had been running a routine deep sky survey, the kind that usually drew a few hundred bored astronomy students and hobbyists. The feed was meant to show distant galaxies, background radiation, nothing remarkable. Until the sky folded, not metaphorically, literally. The stars in one section of the feed bent inward, stretching like reflections in warped glass. A geometric fracture formed, sharp, angular, impossible, and within it, the outline of a place millions of people would soon recognize without ever having seen it before. A pale valley. A lone structure. A sense of pressure that reached through the screen. The live stream cut out after 17 seconds. That was enough. Clips spread faster than anyone could suppress them. Analysis videos appeared within hours. Frame-by-frame breakdowns. Overlays comparing the image to dream reports, to satellite anomalies, to unexplained sensor outages clustered around one region of Nevada. The word Raven Rock began trending before anyone officially said it. Inside the valley, I felt it immediately. The air tightened like a held breath. "They've seen it," I said. "Yes," the voices replied. "And now they are afraid." The fractures in the sky widened. No longer subtle lines but visible seams, glowing faintly even during the valley's washed-out daylight. Through them, I saw motion, not approach, not retreat, but attention, observation on a scale humanity wasn't prepared for. The second recovery attempts didn't come through the ground. It came from above. I watched as aircraft appeared at the edge of the valley, their silhouettes stuttering in and out of existence as they crossed into airspace that no longer obeyed conventional physics. None made it far. One vanished instantly, not exploding, not crashing, simply removed, as if it had never been there. Another spiraled away, instruments dead, pilot screaming over an open channel before signal loss. The rest retreated. This time, there were no denials. Emergency broadcasts replaced regular programming in half a dozen countries. Carefully chosen language. No explanations. Just instructions. Stay indoors. Avoid restricted airspace. Do not approach anomalous regions. The word alien was never used. Neither was first contact. But people understood. They always do. The voices grew quieter as the world grew louder. That worried me. Why are you withdrawing? I asked. We are not, they replied. We are allowing. Allowing what? Choice. That answer felt heavier than any threat. Across the world, strange things began happening. Instruments malfunctioned only when pointed with intent. Satellites lost resolution over specific coordinates. AI systems trained on anomaly data began producing outputs their creators couldn't explain. Symbols, structures, repeating references to a valley that didn't exist on any official map. And dreams. The dreams became universal. Millions of people reported standing in the same place, watching the same building, feeling the same pull to do something, though none could agree on what that something was. I watched from my window as the fractures widened. They were no longer confined to the sky. They appeared along the valley floor, vertical seams of light humming softly, radiating outward like stress lines in a dam about to fail. What happens when they break through? I asked. The voices didn't answer immediately. Then, that depends on whether they come to listen or to take. Marla found a way to reach me again. Not through radio. Through a screen. One of the fractures stabilized briefly, forming a window instead of a tear. Within it, her face appeared. Older, exhausted, lit by emergency lighting. We can see you, she said. Clear as day. I stepped closer. They're forming a coalition, she continued. Joint task forces. Shared intelligence. They think if they act together, they can control this. I almost laughed. You know how this ends, I said. Her eyes filled. We're out of options. No, I replied. You're just out of excuses. She swallowed. They want to send a delegation. Scientists, linguists, no weapons. I hesitated. The voices stirred. They must come without containment strategies, they said, without contingencies. Marla nodded slowly, as if she could hear them too. They won't agree to that. Then they're not ready, I said. The image flickered. Ethan, she said quietly, if this turns into a conflict, it already did, I interrupted. 70 years ago. The fracture closed. The signal came that night, not visual, auditory, a low-frequency pulse that rippled through the planet, harmless to biology but devastating to secrecy. Every sensor system, civilian and military alike, received the same data burst. Coordinates, images, records, the truth, unredacted, not just Raven Rock. Every site, every bunker, every sealed archive where first contact had been mishandled, hidden, buried. The voices spoke once, everywhere. We came to learn, they said. We were met with fear. We waited. We searched for our lost. Tonight, you choose what comes next. The world held its breath. Markets froze. Governments panicked. Religions fractured. And somewhere in all that noise, something rare happened. People started listening. In the valley, the station hummed softly, more alive than it had ever been. I sat at the desk, the logbook open, no longer alone in my role. You've done enough, the voices said. You may rest. I shook my head. Not yet, I replied. They're still deciding. Outside, the fracture stabilized, no longer widening, no longer threatening collapse. Waiting. Just like I was. Just like the world was. Because the next step wouldn't be taken by them. It would be taken by us. Humanity's response did not come all at once. It fractured. Some governments called for calm, urged cooperation, spoke carefully about diplomacy and restraint. Others moved troops, shut down borders, activated contingencies that had been written decades earlier. for scenarios no one had believed would ever arrive. And a few too many saw opportunity. Inside Raven Rock Valley, I felt each decision ripple through the air like pressure changes before a storm. The fractures in the sky reacted subtly to intent, not action. When fear dominated, the seams pulsed brighter. When curiosity outweighed aggression, they stabilized. The voices noticed too. They are divided, they said. They always are, I replied. The first delegation arrived 72 hours after the signal. Not physically. Not yet. Instead, a controlled projection formed within one of the stabilized fractures a conference room rendered imperfectly, edges warping as if reality struggled to agree on its shape. Inside, it sat 12 people. Scientists, linguists, ethicists, no uniforms, no weapons. That mattered. A woman at the center leaned forward. Her name was Dr. Alina Morse, and her voice shook despite her effort to keep it steady. "If you can hear us," she said, "we are here to listen." The fracture brightened. The voices spoke, not layered this time, but singular measured. "We hear you." A collective exhale rippled through the room. I stayed silent, watching. Morse continued. "We acknowledge harm. We acknowledge wrongdoing. We acknowledge that first contact was mishandled and hidden. We are not here to justify it." That word acknowledge carried more weight than any apology ever could. "What do you want from us?" she asked. The voices paused. Then truth, memory, change. "That's not specific," someone else said nervously. "It is everything," the voices replied. They showed them images, not just of Raven Rock, of every site, every bunker, every body, not accusations records, unfiltered, unforgiving. Several members of the delegation wept openly. One man removed his glasses and stared at the table, whispering, "We did this." "Yes," the voices said. "And you forgot." Outside the valley, not everyone was listening. A classified task force, one that had never been formally disbanded, launched what they called a containment test. A localized electromagnetic strike aimed at destabilizing one of the fractures. Inside Raven Rock, the sky screamed. The seams flared violently, light cascading downward like falling glass. I staggered, bracing myself against the disk. "Stop them," I shouted. The voices surged outward, not angry but decisive. The fracture snapped shut. The strike rebounded. Across the world, systems tied to the operation failed simultaneously. Power grids collapsed. Secure data centers wiped themselves clean. Satellites fell silent. No deaths. No injuries. Just loss. The message was clear. Control was no longer an option. The backlash was immediate. Some called it an attack. Others called it restraint. Protests erupted. So did celebrations. Entire belief systems shattered overnight, replaced by something far more dangerous than fear. Certainty. Inside the valley, I felt the shift. "They are choosing," I said. "Yes," the voices replied, "but not together." "What happens if they choose wrong?" A long pause. "Then we leave." The word hit harder than any threat. "You'd abandon us?" I asked. "We would withdraw," they corrected. "You would remain. With the fractures? With the consequences." I thought of the dreams, the leaks, the scars left by curiosity without humility. "They're not ready," I said. "Some are," the voices replied. That is how readiness begins. Dr. Morse returned the next day. The projection flickered more cleanly this time, the fracture stabilizing as if rewarded for restraint. "There's disagreement," she admitted. "Some want to open everything. Others want to seal it all again." "And you?" I asked. She looked at me directly. I think we need to be seen as we are, she said, not as we wish we were. The voices seemed pleased. We will accept one representative, they said, one who comes without authority, without command, without contingency. Morse nodded slowly. I'll come. The room erupted in argument. She ignored it. Shh. Preparation took hours. Not security checks, not equipment. Intent. When Morse stepped through the fracture, she didn't arrive with a flash or spectacle. She simply was standing on the valley floor, visibly overwhelmed by the scale of silence around her. I approached slowly. Welcome, I said. She laughed weakly. I can't believe I'm here. Yes, you can, I replied. You just didn't want to. The voices manifested subtly, not as forms, but as presence, bending light gently around her. You may ask, they said. Morse swallowed. What do we need to change first? The answer came without hesitation. Stop hiding, they said. Stop sealing truth away because it frightens you. Teach your young what you did wrong, not just what you survived. She nodded, tears streaming freely now. And if we do, then this place becomes a bridge, the voices said, not a wound. The fractures dimmed slightly. Across the world, systems stabilized. Panic softened into debate. Debate into reflection. Not peace, but possibility. I sat back at the desk that night. The logbook opened to a new page. For the first time, the page wasn't blank. Words had already formed. Transition phase initiated. I smiled, not because it was over, but because, for the first time in a very long time, humanity hadn't reached for a weapon first. And that, more than any signal, any fracture, any visitor from the stars, was the most unbelievable thing I'd witnessed yet. The valley didn't change all at once. It listened. That was the feeling that settled over Raven Rock in the days following Dr. Morse's arrival. Not tension, not anticipation, but attention. The fractures in the sky no longer pulsed or flared. They hovered, steady seams of light that responded less to fear now and more to honesty. Morse stayed close to the station. She didn't wander. She didn't test boundaries. She sat with me at the desk and read the logbook from the beginning, page by page, without interruption. When she finished, she closed it gently, like a fragile thing. This shouldn't have been your burden alone, she said. It wasn't, I replied. I just happened to be the one who stayed. Outside, the valley floor began to change. Not erasing itself, not glowing, but revealing. Shapes emerged beneath the smooth stone, outlines of old foundations, tracks, impressions of paths long walked and deliberately forgotten. Memory, surfacing. The voices spoke more often now, but softly, like teachers rather than judges. You stand at a threshold, they said. What comes next must be chosen together. Morse nodded. Then we need to bring others. Not officials, not commanders. People who can admit fault without hiding behind power. The valley considered this. The fractures widened slightly in invitation, not a breach. The next arrivals came singly. A teacher from Nairobi who'd organized open forums after the signal. A paramedic from Sao Paulo who'd treated patients suffering from shared dreams. An archivist from Warsaw who'd released sealed documents and lost her job for it. None were important in the way governments define importance. That mattered most. They arrived through stabilized thresholds, stepping into the valley with awe and fear and something like reverence. Each was greeted not by spectacle, but by silent space to feel the weight of where they stood. They spoke, they listened, they argued, they cried. The voices answered questions, but only after long pauses, as if weighing intent behind each word. What happens to the dead? The archivist asked. They are remembered, the voices replied. That is not the same as being buried. "What happens to the sites?" asked the paramedic. "They are unsealed," came the answer. "Not opened. Unsealed. What was hidden returns to history." "And you?" the teacher asked. "What happens to you?" The valley hummed. "We step back," the voices said. "We observe. We do not rule." That answer frightened some of them. It relieved others. Resistance came anyway. It always does. Resistance came anyway. It always does. A coalition of states announced a unilateral plan to neutralize the valley permanently, for global safety, they said. They called it a failsafe. They called it necessary. Inside Raven Rock, the air tightened again. "They are afraid of losing control," Morse said quietly. "They already have," I replied. The valley responded not with force, but with clarity. Every fracture brightened simultaneously, projecting images across the sky cities, classrooms, homes, places where people had chosen transparency over suppression since the signal. Numbers followed. Reduced violence, lower panic responses, increased cooperation across borders. The data spoke where words had failed. The coalition's announcement was quietly withdrawn. No explanation given. That night, the voices asked me to walk with them. Not physically, conceptually. The valley opened in a way it never had before, revealing layers beneath reality, paths of probability, echoes of choices unmade. I saw a future where the bunkers had stayed sealed forever, where fear calcified into doctrine and secrecy metastasized. It ended badly. I saw another where the valley was destroyed outright. It ended worse. Then I saw this path. Uncertain, uneven, human, still alive. "You were never meant to be a jailer," the voices said. "You were meant to be a witness until witnesses multiplied." "What happens to me?" I asked again. This time, the pause was longer. "You may leave," they said. "The threshold no longer requires a constant guardian." The offer landed heavier than any sentence spoken before. I thought of the years I'd spent here, suspended between moments, of the person I'd been before Raven Rock, and the one I'd become. "And if I stay," I asked. "Then you become part of the place," they said. "Not alone, not trapped, but anchored." I looked at the people gathered near the station, talking, laughing softly, arguing over language and ethics and responsibility, like the world depended on it. Because it did. "I'll stay," I said. "For now." The valley accepted that answer without judgment. The final change came quietly. One morning, the fractures closed, not sealed, not erased, just dormant. The sky returned to something resembling normal, though anyone who'd seen it before would never mistake it again. The bunkers did not vanish. They opened. Carefully, their contents catalogued, documented, returned to history under international oversight so public it couldn't be buried again. The emissary's resting place became a memorial, not to an invasion, but to a failure to listen. People came, not tourists, students, researchers, families. They didn't all agree on what it meant. That was fine. Agreement had never been the goal. Understanding was. I still write, not because I have to, because someone should. The logbook has become an archive now, its pages no longer resisting duplication. Copies circulate freely. Schools teach from them. Debates cite them. Raven Rock is no longer hidden. It is no longer contained. It is contextualized. Sometimes at night, I feel the valley listening, still patient, attentive, no longer alone in its watchfulness. The voices speak less now. When they do, it's simple. "You chose well," they say. I don't answer. Some truths don't need replies. They just need to be carried forward. The last thing the valley gave back was time. Not all of it. Not cleanly. But enough. I noticed it slowly at first. Sunrises began to feel consistent again. Shadows moved the way they were supposed to. My watch, which had once meant nothing, started matching the light outside the station. I was aging again, not rapidly, not painfully, just normally. When I mentioned it to the others, no one seemed surprised. "That was always the plan," Dr. Morse said. "You were never meant to be removed from the world forever." "Just held in place," I replied. She nodded. "Until the world caught up, Raven Rock no longer felt like a container or a scar. It felt like a meeting place that had finally learned how to host. The station remained, but it had changed. The walls still stood. The desk still bore the weight of decades of writing, but the sense of isolation was gone. Voices echoed their now human ones, soft, respectful, careful not to overwhelm the space. People came in rotation, no permanent staff, no guards, no weapons, just stewards. The valley didn't require protection anymore. It required attention. The final directive didn't come from the voices. It came from us. The International Council, no longer secret, no longer classified, met on the edge of the valley under open sky. No screens, no projections, no distance. They asked one question: what happens if we fail again? No one answered immediately. Then I stood. "If you fail," I said, "the record remains. That's the difference now." They looked at me, some with discomfort, some with relief. "You can't erase this," I continued. "You can't seal it away. You can't pretend it never happened. The valley won't allow it. Neither will the people who've seen it." "And if we try anyway?" someone asked. I smiled thinly. "Then the valley won't stop you," I said. "It'll just stop helping." That landed harder than any threat. The voices spoke that night for the last time in the way I'd known them. Not everywhere, just here. "You have reached the point where memory no longer requires guardianship," they said. "Only care." "What happens to you?" I asked. A familiar question, a different answer. "We do what we always intended," they replied. "We step aside." The presence receded, not vanishing, not leaving, but loosening its hold, like hands releasing something that could finally stand on its own. The valley breathed. For the first time, it felt entirely present. I began preparing the final record. Not the logbook that would continue, passed from hand to hand, but a single document. A summary, written plainly, without mysticism or accusation. What happened? What was hidden? What was lost? What was almost lost again? And what changed? I wrote about fear, the kind that makes intelligent people do unforgivable things and call it necessity. I wrote about silence and how easily it becomes policy. I wrote about the emissary and how history might have unfolded differently if one voice had been heard instead of dissected. And I wrote about choice, because that was the real story. Not aliens, not anomalies. Choice. The handoff ceremony was small. No flags, no anthems. No speeches meant to inspire. Just names read aloud. Every person who disappeared in the valley. Every sealed report. Every suppressed witness. Each name spoken once. And remembered. When it was done, the council stood, unsure what to do next. "That's it?" someone asked quietly. Dr. Morse nodded. "That's it. I stayed for another year, not because I was needed. Because I wanted to watch what came next. Schools incorporated the Raven Rock record into ethics courses. Military academies taught it as a failure case, not a victory. Scientists cited it when arguing for transparency over prestige. Not everyone agreed. Some never would. But disagreement was no longer dangerous. Only denial was. Eventually, I left the station for the last time. I locked the door behind me. Not because it needed locking. Because habits matter. At the edge of the valley, I stopped and looked back. The land looked ordinary now. That was the strangest part. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying, if I regret the years suspended between moments, the life that paused while the world moved on. I don't, because I didn't miss my life. I intersected with something larger, and when I finally rejoined the world fully, I carried that with me. We all do now. The valley still exists, not as a mystery, as a reminder. That intelligence without humility is just another kind of violence. That secrecy doesn't protect us from consequences, it delays them. And that the most important moments in history don't announce themselves with explosions or invasions, but with the quiet, terrifying opportunity to choose differently. This is the record, not so it can be believed, but so it can never be forgotten.